To everybody's shock, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Thieves, which is launched in France on Wednesday, April 12, is having fun with optimistic word of mouth and favorable evaluations in the United States, the place the movie has been launched for 2 weeks. As a result of the license, Dungeons & Dragons has, for many years, slightly maintained a quasi-masochistic relationship with Hollywood, marked by a primary apocalyptically unhealthy adaptation, launched in 2000, regardless of the presence in the casting of Jeremy Irons, who embodies the large villain of this characteristic movie. This primary adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons is, at the time, a kitsch disaster, finally much less picturesque than an Italian peplum from the early 60s, even when it typically makes one assume of it as rote at the time. The world, poor screenplay, caricatural dialogues, outrageous manufacturing, dated particular results, the listing of, justified, criticisms made of Courtney Solomon's movie is infinite. Particularly because it was launched in theaters barely 12 months earlier than The Fellowship of the Ring, first movie in the trilogy of Lord of the Rings of Peter Jackson, worldwide success benefiting from a huge price range, as a result of, as typically, the industrial catastrophe of the first movie. Dungeons & Dragons is for a lot of a query of cash. The bold preliminary challenge, and its 100 million greenback price range, has melted over the years. The funding will lastly be divided by 3, for filming in the Czech Republic, and financial savings on all fronts, that are strongly felt display. However, this failure is above all the end result of an extended sequence of adventures worthy of a role-playing sport marketing campaign, unfold over 20 years. Learn additionally, article reserved for our subscribers on the web. Role-playing video games are reinventing their codes and bold challenge, however a fragile firm. The concept of adapting Dungeons & Dragons and movie emerges very early in the thoughts of Gary Gygax, co-creator of the role-playing sport and president of TSR, the firm that publishes it. In the 1980s, when his invention grew to become an enormous business success, Mr. Gygax noticed in Hollywood the future of the franchise, which already had its array of novels and books of which you're the hero. Dungeons & Dragons is a social phenomenon in the United States, and the producers really feel the potential of a license identified and appreciated by youngsters. Gary Gygax then loses curiosity in the administration of his enterprise and even delegates the writing of the guidelines of the sport, his prerogative jealously defended till then, to commit himself to his imaginative and prescient of an excellent epic movie. From 1982, he spent most of his time in Los Angeles. He rents the former residence of director King Vidor, on the heights of Beverly Hills, at nice expense, works on scripts and has a sequence of conferences. I promise you that if the D&D film, Dungeons & Dragons, is less than the normal of high-quality Star Wars and Raiders of the Misplaced Ark, not solely will I smash it, however I will even apologize to you, he wrote in the July 1982 Subject of Dragon, the official journal of TSR. However, the challenge is slipping. In Los Angeles, Gygax leads the good life, organizes large events, divorces, and solely not often returns to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the place TSR is headquartered. Picture taken from the movie Dungeons & Dragons, by Courtney Solomon. Paramount nonetheless, on this quiet little city the place TSR is the foremost employer. The clouds are gathering. First there's the battle between Gygax and Dave Arneson, the co-creator of the sport. Arneson, who believes that he was defrauded by Gygax in an unfair sharing of rights, multiplies the authorized proceedings in opposition to TSR. The sport can be the goal of campaigns by American conservative spiritual actions, which see it as Satanist and hyperlink it to a number of information gadgets and high-profile suicides. Gross sales of the sport stay very comfy, however, are leveling off. And TSR, which has recruited employees en masse with no clear plan, is poorly managed and has a really absent CEO, is beginning to lose cash. Tons of cash. Layoffs adopted each other and, in 1985, Gary Gygax was ousted from the firm following a revolt of shareholders led by Lorraine Williams, the director of TSR, whom Gygax had met in Hollywood and satisfied to investing in society. The movie challenge ends with the departure of Gygax, cascading issues after which, in 1990, a younger Canadian pupil, Courtney Solomon, calls TSR headquarters, lands an appointment and convinces Lorraine Williams that he can produce an excellent movie. Dungeons & Dragons. After I received the rights to Dungeons & Dragons, he used to be 19 or 20 years outdated, and the firm modified Palms a number of occasions, he'll inform later in an extended interview returning to the causes for the sinking. I used to be younger, inexperienced, and gave them veto rights over the script and the rights agreements. No studio would ever try this, Lee Arenberg and Kristen Wilson, as Elwood and Norda. Paramount. The issues instantly multiply, whereas Courtney Solomon needs to make a journey movie, Lorraine Williams, on the monocle of Star Wars, needs a movie which makes it attainable to promote amount of derived merchandise and toys. I mentioned, ma'am, your viewers does not wish to purchase toys. That is not it, the listening to of Dungeons & Dragons. She did not care, he would say years later, visibly embittered. He additionally accuses the former director of having scuttled a gathering with James Cameron, who would have thought of investing in the manufacturing of the movie. The world particular provide for college kids and academics Central our limitless content material from €8.99 monthly as an alternative of €10.99 subscribe at the similar time. TSR multiplies the unhealthy monetary decisions and continues to lose cash. In 1997, it was the coup de grace, the firm handed underneath the management of Wizards of the Coast, which had developed into a behemoth of board video games due to the success of its card sport. Magic: The Gathering. The brand new house owners of the license take a dim view of the struggling movie challenge, directed by an unknown particular person, even when Solomon satisfied the producer Joel Silver, the deadly weapon, Crystal Lore, to hitch him. Wizards of the Coast needed to get rid of this challenge and requested Solomon to make it a low-budget movie for direct DVD launch. He refuses, resigns from his function as director, and Wizards of the Coast sues him for breach of contract. After negotiations, a compromise is discovered. Courtney Solomon will be capable to launch the movie in theaters, supplied that the challenge is accomplished in the months to come back. After this time, he'll lose the rights. Learn additionally, Magic, the little card sport that has developed into large actor Bruce Payne as the warrior Damodar. Paramount. The group then pulls out all the stops to finish the movie as shortly as attainable. 3 months of taking pictures in Prague in the summertime of 1999, fraught with issues, speedy post-production in Germany and England. The movie was lastly launched in December 2000, and, regardless of extraordinarily detrimental evaluations and disappointing admissions, it should ultimately usher in sufficient cash, due to DVDs and TV broadcast rights, for 2 very low-budget, direct-to-video sequels to be validated by Wizards of the Coast. Ongoing conflicts over rights greater than 20 years later, Dungeons & Dragons. The distinction of thieves did not totally escape the rights and takeover points that plagued the improvement of the first movie. In May 2013, whereas the success of the sequence Sport of Thrones has revived curiosity in medieval fantasy universes, Warner Bros. Reveals engaged on the improvement of a movie primarily based on chainmail sport created by Gary Gygax and whose Dungeons & Dragons is a direct byproduct, in collaboration with Courtney Solomon, a dragon as depicted in the first Dungeons & Dragons film, launched in 2000. The announcement instantly angered Hasbro, the sport and toy big that purchased Wizards of the Coast in 1998, and due to this fact holds the license for Dungeons & Dragons. The corporate says it's working by itself movie challenge, with Common, and is submitting a criticism in opposition to Courtney Solomon's manufacturing firm, which in flip is submitting a criticism. After a number of negotiations, an amicable settlement was reached in 2015. However, once more, the challenge stagnated. Even the intervention of 2 stars identified for his or her attachment to role-playing video games, Joe Manganiello, Spider-Man, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, quick and livid, who supplied themselves as screenwriter and producer respectively, failed to maneuver the manufacturing ahead. Hasbro will ultimately entrust the movie to Paramount, which is able to lead the challenge round a screenplay by Chris McKay and Michael Gillio. Regardless of this, not like the first movie, Dungeons and Dragons, the distinction of Thieves managed to take care of, all through these lengthy negotiations, a cushy price range of $150 million. Will or not it's sufficient to method the unique, imaginative and prescient of Gary Gygax? Will by no means know. The co-creator of the role-playing sport died in 2008. Learn additionally, article reserved for our subscribers. Function playing, from the dad and mom's storage to the TV studios.